Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into something that's quietly running behind the scenes of almost every major AI product, token rate limiting. It's easy to think that one question is just like any other, but in the world of AI, that's just not true. This shift in thinking is absolutely essential for building AI that's stable, fair, and doesn't bankrupt you. So let's break down how it all works.
So in the old world of APIs, every single request was treated pretty much the same. It was just a counter. 1, 2, 3. So a super simple question like, hey, what's 2 plus 2 gets counted as 1. But a massive, heavy-duty request like, analyze these 100 documents and tell me how people are feeling, also gets counted as 1. One of these is a feather, the other is, well, it's a truckload of bricks. They are not the same, not even close.
And that really gets to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? Should these two completely different workloads be treated as equals by your system? The answer, of course, is a huge no. And that's exactly why the old way of just counting requests is completely falling apart in the age of AI.
So here's our game plan for this deep dive. We're going to break this down into a few chapters. First, in Chapter 1, we'll define what token limiting actually is. Then in Chapter 2, we'll get into why it's so incredibly important. After that, for Chapter 3, we'll get practical and talk about how you can implement it. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by looking at how this helps us build more predictable AI.
All right, let's jump right in. Chapter 1, what in the world is token rate limiting? And how is it so different from just counting API calls?
At its core, it's all about changing what we measure. Instead of just counting how many times someone asks a question, we are measuring the actual work the AI has to do. And in the world of LLMs, that work is measured in tokens. You can think of tokens as little pieces of words. So token rate limiting means we're putting a cap on the actual amount of brainpower being used, not just the number of questions being asked.
And this number, wow, this really brings it home. If we go back to our first example, that complex document analysis, it uses over 7,000 times more compute power than the simple math problem. A traditional rate limiter would see them as exactly the same. That massive gap is the entire reason we need a new approach.
So a really smart token rate limiter has a few key traits. First, it measures everything, the tokens you put in and the tokens the AI generates back to you. It gets that every single request has a different cost. It can even handle tricky stuff, like when input tokens cost less than output tokens. And it's dynamic. It's always checking to make sure the system stays balanced.
Okay, let's move on to Chapter 2. We know what it is, but this is where we get into the really critical stuff. Why is this an absolute necessity, and not just some nice feature to have?
First and foremost, let's talk security. But we're not just talking about keeping servers online. We're talking about protecting your bank account from something called a denial of wallet attack. And yes, it's as bad as it sounds.
So here's how an attack like that would go down. Imagine someone with bad intentions starts spamming your service with a huge document, over and over. Without token limits, this one person could force your system to process millions, even billions of tokens, completely exhausting your expensive GPUs, crashing the system, and leaving you with a jaw-dropping bill. The token limit is your shield. It's a hard boundary that stops this kind of abuse in its tracks.
Next up is all about fairness. In any shared system, you always have to worry about the noisy neighbor problem. You can't let one person's behavior ruin the experience for everybody else.
Without any limits, one single user who decides to process 1,000 documents at once could suck up all the available AI power. What happens then? The service grinds to a halt for every other paying customer. But with token limiting, you give each user or team their own protected slice of the pie. Their heavy usage doesn't affect anyone else. It's what makes a reliable service possible for everyone.
This also connects directly to how you actually make money. Let's be real, modern AI platforms don't charge you per question. They charge you for the amount of compute you use, which is measured in tokens. So your infrastructure needs to speak the same language. This is what allows you to build pricing tiers that make sense. Maybe a free user gets 10,000 tokens a day, while a pro user gets 1 million. Enterprise clients get their own custom quotas. Token rate limiting is the machinery under the hood that actually enforces these tiers and makes the whole business model work.
And for any developers out there, this one's for you. This is an absolute lifesaver, because without these controls, it is terrifyingly easy for your costs to just explode because of one unexpected thing a user does. And that leads to some very, very shocking bills.
I mean, check this out. A customer uploads just one big document. To them, it's a single action. But behind the scenes, your AI agent might burn through millions of tokens to analyze it, landing you with a $25 charge for that one click. Now imagine thousands of users doing that. Without a hard cap, you've got a financial disaster on your hands.
All right, so we've covered the what and the why. So for our final chapter, chapter 3, let's get practical. How do you actually put this into practice? What are the key principles you need to follow?
The first step, and honestly the most important one, is you have to do your homework. You need to really, deeply understand how your application uses tokens. This is not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. You have to profile your own unique workloads to set limits that actually make sense.
And as you can see here, different tasks have totally different token footprints. A simple chat, maybe a few hundred tokens. But a big document analysis could be over 100,000. And creating embeddings is another beast entirely. Figuring out these numbers for your own app is the absolute key to setting limits that work.
Okay, so once you have your numbers, then you can move on to the fun part, choosing your strategy. The real power of this whole thing is its flexibility. You can apply these limits in all sorts of different ways to hit your specific business goals.
For example, you could set limits for each individual user, or you could give an entire company a shared pool of tokens to use. You could even set different limits for different AI models, maybe give a bigger quota to cheaper, faster models. You could even get as granular as setting different limits by geographic region. The key is to match the strategy to what you're trying to achieve.
And that brings us to our conclusion. All of these ideas, from measuring compute to setting flexible limits, it all boils down to one single powerful idea: building predictable AI. It's about getting away from fragile systems with scary runaway costs and moving towards strong, reliable services that you can actually count on.
So, if you take anything away from this, it should be these key points. In AI, you have to treat requests based on the compute they use, not just a simple count. This is what protects you from abuse, from surprise bills, and from unfair usage. It lines up your tech directly with your business model, and ultimately, it's what turns unpredictable AI systems into the reliable services we all want to build. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We are really just at the beginning of this journey. As AI agents get more and more autonomous, making hundreds of their own decisions from a single prompt, this whole question of how we measure and control their impact is only going to get more and more critical. Thank you for watching.